Thanks for tuning in to the Ohio Afterschool Network podcast, bringing the power of the network right to your ears. The Ohio Afterschool Network is a convener, a connector, a collective voice, and a catalyst for change in the out-of-school time field. OAN leverages our statewide and national partnerships for you, our supporters and members, and brings ideas, funding, and resources back to Ohio. OAN is the real deal, and that's the power of the network. To find out more about OAN, please visit oanohio.org. Hey everybody, it's Nichelle from the Ohio Afterschool Network. Thanks for listening today to the podcast. One of our greatest challenges for our field of after school and summer learning, OST, is ensuring that we have enough great staff, quality staff. Because of the nature of what we do, we often have part-time staff who come to the after-school field for a while and then move on from there to other jobs or other fields. So then enter COVID-19. Now we find ourselves in uncharted territory as a field, one where we're seeking staff with maybe a slightly different set of skills for a slightly different job, perhaps smaller group sizes or leading students virtually. And as leaders and supervisors, we have to be flexible, yet still demand the highest quality of skilled professionals to lead our programs. So on today's episode, we're going to be talking with Katherine Spinney from Katherine Spinney Coaching. Katherine was a presenter at the February OAN Best Foot Forward conference that happened in Dublin. And she presented a workshop that was called How to Hire and Develop High Quality Staff. And I had the pleasure to sit in on part of her presentation, and she was just amazing. And since then, because I'm that kind of person, I've been stalking her on social media and following her presentations. And she's really pivoted to virtual coaching and virtual professional development, and offering the same type of amazing tips to folks leading virtual teams. So Katherine has spent nearly 20 years serving youth and families, where she increasingly saw the need and opportunity to support OST professionals. Through coaching and training, it's her goal to support the OST field in creating stronger programs by focusing on supporting high-quality staff through high-quality leadership. It's time that we invest in ourselves in order to invest in those that we serve. So anyway, join me, please, in welcoming Katherine to the show this morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Nichelle. Good morning to all the listeners out there in Ohio and now across the country, across the world, right? This is part of the blessing of being virtual.
Absolutely.
And I'm so grateful to be here today. And, just a few months ago, it feels so long ago that we were doing something like this in person. And now it feels kind of strange to think about being in a big conference room with a bunch of people.
Right.
And,
I know.
Yeah. And so whatever we're able to do virtually, I think some version of this is going to linger into our work going forward. So I appreciate you being on the forefront and doing this podcast for those in our community.
Well, thank you. And, I appreciate you today joining us because, your expertise and words of wisdom in coaching, I've really enjoyed watching you, with your inspirational messages, and just kind of thinking through how we're going to do this as a field, and so I appreciate your leadership during this time. So for folks who maybe didn't come to BFF or haven't had yet the opportunity to follow you on social media, why don't you talk a little bit about what your background is, Katherine, and how you became an expert on leading teams of after-school professionals?
Yeah. So to those who did not have the joy of being at the conference, shame on you. No, not shame on you, but
there'll be more opportunities, right? Just follow OAN on social media.
Yeah. So next year, right? Next year we'll give you another shot.
Right on.
To redeem yourself. So You and I have talked, Nichelle. The word expert makes me a little jumpy, but I do feel comfortable saying I have spent my entire professional life serving youth and families. Mm-hmm. And part of why I've been so driven to now serve in this capacity where instead of working directly in programs, I'm supporting those who are directly in programs is over the 20 years, I have been so blessed to have all these different roles. I started as a classroom teacher. Then when I transitioned into the out of school time world, I have been everything from a volunteer to an intern to a frontline staff to a director to a deputy director. And so I've gotten to see a little bit of how the wheels turn and how the systems affect the work that we're doing on the ground. Mm-hmm. And as I kept moving up, quote unquote, and seeing how these systems were operating, there's so much good intention and there's so many obstacles for those who are serving our youth to do it really well. Mm-hmm. And so that's where I am today, is to say it all begins and ends with staff. And your comment in the beginning that we have so many staff that come and go, right, that's largely because we treat a lot of our positions as come and go positions, right? Yes. We hire people very quickly. We sort of cast out this wide net and say, anyone and everyone who wants to come join us, please do. We have a lot of part-time opportunities right now in the field. They say that as many as 2/3 of the positions are part-time. Mm-hmm. And we don't pay very well traditionally. Our hours aren't great traditionally. We don't provide a lot of professional development traditionally. And so we treat it like a come and go position, and therefore the folks we hire do too. Right.
Yeah. 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 Mm-hmm. I completely, of course, agree with that. You and I have had offline conversations about that. And I think that, the investment, and I know you're going to talk a lot about that today, but investment in our staff is really a way to stabilize the field and really have best outcomes for our families and kids, which is really what I think a lot of these programs, well, I would say all of them are really about, is having those great outcomes for youth. So, go ahead. Were you going to say something?
Yeah. Well, and there's a lot of things I say over and over again because they're true and they deserve to be emphasized. And one of them is that we pride ourselves on being a field of relationships, right? That the work that we do is built foundationally on the relationships we have with our youth and families. Yet we have this almost revolving door of staff, right? Yeah. So field-wide, the National Afterschool Association has found that our annual staff turnover rate is at about 40%. And in some programs, it's much, much higher even than that. And so when you think about what that means to every piece of the puzzle, to the people who are hiring, to colleagues, to the youth and families, where it's just this cycle of hire new person, there's a gap, now someone else has to pick up the pieces because we don't have enough staff, and we just keep doing it over and over and over again. And there are really practical reasons for that, right? Like money is an issue. We can't pretend that it's not. And we're often so busy in the day-to-day, we don't take the opportunity to step back and say, we need to be more proactive about what's happening and stop being so reactive. And my hope during this time is programs have had a breath to step back and say, okay, what are we doing? What is working? What's not working? And so even throughout all of the challenge that's happening right now, I'm seeing in places a little bit of a light bulb moment of we need to do things differently.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, just kind of talking a little bit about that, so much has happened in the last few months, right? We've changed from, in many situations from a direct service model to a virtual model. And now we also might see supervisors finding themselves supporting teams of staff virtually. So could you maybe take a moment to reflect on the current state of leadership in the OST field?
Yes. And it's, I think with anything that happens, some things change and some things never change, right? And so when it comes to leadership, there are some core principles that never change that I hope are not changing during this time, which is, as a leader, you are responsible for guiding your staff through what is happening. So right now, it happens to be this world that's upside down in lots of ways, right? But even when things are more, quote unquote, normal, that's still your role, is to help your staff get through what the current situation is. And you do that by communicating what is going on, by involving them in the process. They're not just recipients of your decision making, they're active parts of what's going on, that you are providing support that they need, and that support looks emotional and it looks practical. So in this moment in time, a lot of that support is who has the devices and the internet and the logistical things they need to work during this time. But it's also an understanding that there is work and there is life, and sometimes one gets in the way of the other, and we have to be very conscious of that.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And so, right now it's because of everything that's going on in the world, but even before all of this happened and we were in this crisis, that holds true, right? Our staffs have their lives, and this is a magnified moment for leaders to say, how are you doing and what's going on? And do you need some support in this area? So the virtual piece that has changed, right? So all of that stuff is sort of normal. The virtual piece / the crisis piece really just amplifies all of that. And what's interesting, a lot of the reaction, instead of amping up the support and amping up the communication, what a lot of leaders do in crisis is they turn the volume down. With good intention, right? Because they say, well, I don't have the information, so I'm just not going to say anything until I do, right? That's a very common response in crisis.
Yes, we've seen that a lot lately from from a lot of different organizations.
Yes. Yeah. Like, I'm just going to wait till I have something substantial to share with the team. And they find that's really harmful when your staff is confused and unstable and vulnerable and they're not sure what's going on. You have to over communicate. You have to communicate about your communicating and let them know, even if there's no change, to let them know there is no change, right? Yes. But the silence is what is really, really not helping. And the second thing I've heard is everybody's in their own situation. We know that. Some people have never worked harder. Some people are home twiddling their thumbs, right? Everyone's in a different situation. But what I've heard from a lot of leaders is, I've asked them, are you keeping up your staff meetings? Are you keeping up your one-on-one check-ins? Are you keeping up? And unfortunately, a big response I'm getting is like, well, they're so overwhelmed or they're so busy. We haven't done a team meeting in a while, or we haven't done it. And I'm just like, not only do you need to keep doing them, this is where you need to amp them up, and you have to be checking in even more, not less, even more than you did before. So I would say really a lot of the leadership principles stay the same through this moment, but where they change is the logistics of the technology and figuring out what bells and whistles work well for you. But to communicate more and reach out